My mother-in-law threw a cup of scalding coffee in my face in the middle of my own hospital ward in front of 11 nurses, 4 patients, and a security camera. And then she said, loud enough for the whole floor, "Now maybe you'll remember your place. You're a nurse, Rowan. You are not family." I stood there with coffee running down my collar and burning my throat and my badge, and I did not move. Not because I was frightened, because at 6:04 that morning, 3 hours and 12 minutes before Deborah Vance walked onto my floor, I had signed a piece of paper in Dr. Halima Rashid's office. And that piece of paper made me the medical director of that entire hospital. Nobody in my family knew, not my husband, not his mother. The announcement wasn't going out until Monday, and that is the only reason I want to tell you this story. Not because a woman got what was coming to her, but because of what those 3 hours and 12 minutes revealed about the family I'd been married into for 9 years. They didn't attack a director. They attacked a nurse. That's who they thought I was, and that's exactly how they treated me. And everything they said in front of that camera was said to a woman they believed had no power at all. The coffee cooled. My skin blistered. 2nd degree, my forearm and collarbone. The ward's own burn protocol applied by my own staff, documented by my own charge nurse. And I said very quietly, "Beckett, call security. And call risk management, and don't let her leave the floor." Then I looked at my husband, because Trent was standing right there, 3 feet away, and had watched his mother do it, and had not moved either. "Trent," I said, "do you want to say anything at all before this becomes a legal matter?" And my husband of 9 years said, "Ro, don't be dramatic. She's upset. You know how she gets." You know how she gets. 9 years, 4 words, and the whole marriage summarized. Let me take you back 6 weeks, because the coffee wasn't the beginning. The coffee was just the first thing they did in front of witnesses. I need you to understand who I was in that family, because it explains everything about that morning. I met Trent Vance 11 years ago at a fundraiser when I was a captain in the Army Nurse Corps, and he was a pharmaceutical rep with a good suit and an easy laugh. I liked him. I still remember why. He made things light. When you spend your 20s triaging soldiers, a man who makes things light is a kind of oxygen. His mother-in-law did not like me from the first Sunday dinner, and she made it a project. Deborah Vance had raised 2 sons alone after her husband left, and she had built her entire identity around one idea. The Vance family was better than where it came from. Trent's older brother married a woman from old money family. Trent married a soldier from a trailer in Odessa, Texas, whose father drove a gravel truck. "A nurse," she said at that first dinner, turning the word over like a coin she suspected was counterfeit. "Well, somebody has to do it. Somebody has to do it." For 9 years, my mother-in-law introduced me to people as Trent's wife. She works at the hospital. Never Major, never Rowan. When I made Major, she said, "Congratulations," by asking whether I'd finally have time to think about children. When I came back from my 2nd deployment, the one that left the burn scar on my forearm, the one I don't talk about, she asked whether I'd gotten it out of my system. And here is my part, the part I have to own. I let her. For 9 years, I let her. I told myself it was strength. Rise above it. Don't stoop. Every time Trent said, "That's just how Mom is, don't make it a thing," I chose peace over dignity and called it maturity. The truth is, I was raised in a house where you didn't cause trouble, and the Army taught me to absorb impact, and I put those 2 things together and made a woman who could take absolutely anything without flinching, which is a superpower right up until the moment it becomes a permission slip. 6 weeks before the coffee, 3 things happened in the same fortnight, and they changed everything. The first was a phone call from Dr. Rashid. The second was Deborah's cardiac diagnosis. And the third, the one that actually broke me open, was what my mother-in-law said to my 13-year-old niece at Easter dinner, at a table full of people, while my husband looked at his plate. The phone call came on a Tuesday in March. "Major Vance, this is Halima Rashid, Chief of Staff. Do you have 20 minutes this week?" I assumed it was about the sepsis protocol I'd rewritten the fall before. It wasn't. Dr. Rashid sat me down in her office, folded her hands, and said, "We're restructuring clinical leadership. I want to talk to you about the medical director position." I actually laughed. "Ma'am, I'm a nurse." "You're a major with 2 combat deployments, a master's in health administration you completed on your own time, and the only person in this building whose protocol revision dropped our sepsis mortality by 9%. She didn't smile. "Also, the position doesn't require an MD. It requires someone who can run a hospital. I've watched you run a ward under conditions that would have folded 3 physicians I could name." I sat there in her office, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, and it took me a moment to identify it because it was so unfamiliar. I felt seen. She said, "There's a process. Interviews, board approval. 6 weeks, maybe 8. And Major, I'd advise you to keep it quiet until it's signed. Boards get strange when things leak." I kept it quiet. I told exactly no one, not even Trent. I've been asked about that 100 times since. "Why didn't you tell your own husband?" And the answer took me a long time to say out loud, so I'll just say it plainly. Because I already knew what would happen if I did. He'd tell his mother. He always told his mother. And then Deborah would find the angle to make it small. Isn't that nice, dear? They must be desperate. And I would have to watch the best thing that ever happened to my career get filed down into nothing at a Sunday dinner. I didn't tell my husband because I wanted to enjoy it for 6 weeks first. That should have told me everything. It took a cup of coffee to make me listen. The second thing happened 10 days later. Deborah collapsed at her bridge club. Atrial fibrillation with a structural component. She needed a valve procedure within the year, and the cardiac program that could do it was at my hospital. Trent called me from the ER at 11 at night, panicked, and I did what I have done my entire adult life. I went. I stood at her bedside for 6 hours. I translated every word the cardiologist said into English she could understand. I made the calls that got her onto the surgical schedule 6 weeks earlier than the queue allowed, because I knew who to ask and how to ask them, and that is a thing 20 years in medicine buys you. And when she was stable and comfortable and it was almost dawn, Deborah Vance looked at me and said, "Where's Trent? I want someone from the family in here." I was holding her chart. "Trent went for coffee, Deborah." "Good," she said, and closed her eyes. "I want someone from the family in here." I stood in that room for a moment. Then I put down her chart and went to the staff bathroom and cried for exactly 90 seconds, which is how long I allow, and then I washed my face and went back to work. The third thing was Easter. Trent's brother has a daughter, Macy, 13, sweet and shy and going through the awkward year where a body becomes a foreign country. She'd worn a dress she was proud of. I know she was proud of it because she'd texted me a picture 2 days before with 3 exclamation points. Deborah looked at her granddaughter across the table in front of 14 people and said, "Well, that's certainly a lot of dress for a girl your size, sweetheart. Don't have seconds." The table did what that table always does. It laughed a little and moved on. Macy's face went red. She put her fork down, and she looked around the table, at her father, at her uncle, at every adult in that room for one single person to say something. And I watched every adult at that table find something interesting on their plate, my husband included. So I said, "Deborah, that was a cruel thing to say to a child, and you're going to apologize to her." The room went silent.
I have never heard a room go that silent. 9 years of absorbing impact, and I'd never once returned fire. Deborah's face did something remarkable, genuine shock, then something colder. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me. She's 13. Apologize." "Rowan," Trent's hand on my arm, "not now." "Yes, now." "When, Trent? When she's 23 counting calories in a bathroom?" "Now." Deborah stood up, picked up her handbag, and said the sentence that started the 6-week countdown to the coffee. "I don't know who you think you are in this family, but let me remind you, you married into it. You are a guest at this table, and guests don't correct their hosts." She left. Half the table left with her. Macy stayed. Macy sat next to me and put her head on my shoulder and cried.
I need to tell you what happened in the 6 weeks between Easter and the coffee, because that's where my family showed me exactly what it was. It started with silence. Deborah didn't call. Trent's Sunday dinners went on without me. He went alone and came home lighter, and I understood that I was being served a punishment I was supposed to feel. Then it escalated in the way these things do, through other people. An aunt called to say she was worried about the tension. A cousin messaged asking if it was true I'd screamed at Deborah in front of everyone. Trent's brother, Maisie's father, the man whose daughter I'd defended, sent a text saying, "Ro, Mom's really shaken up. Maybe just call and smooth it over. Maisie's fine. She's forgotten it already." She hadn't forgotten it. She texted me twice a week now. But I understood the assignment. In the Vance family, the person who names the injury is the person who caused the trouble. Trent worked me at home the whole time. Not cruelly, that's the part people don't understand. Softly, constantly. "You know Mom's sick. This stress can't be good for her heart, Ro. You made your point. Just apologize for the way you said it. It's not about who's right." 5.5 weeks of that. And I held. I want you to know I held. Then, 11 days before the coffee, Deborah's surgery got scheduled at my hospital, in the cardiac unit 2 floors above my ward, with a surgeon I'd trained the side for 4 years. And that is when my mother-in-law changed tactics, because that is when she remembered that I was useful. She called me herself for the first time in 6 weeks. Warm as spring. "Rowan, darling, I need you to look at some paperwork for me." I want to be very clear about what happened next, because it matters for everything that came after. She wanted me to be her medical advocate, the person who reviews the consents, coordinates with the surgical team, has the authority to ask questions and get real answers. It's a role I've performed for a dozen family members and half my neighborhood, because when you're a nurse, you become everyone's translator. I said yes. 6 weeks of silence, a public humiliation, an entire family closing ranks against me, and when the woman who did it needed help, I said yes, because a patient is a patient, and because some part of me still believed that if I was good enough for long enough, they'd finally let me in. That's not nobility. I've thought about it a lot since. That's a 9-year habit wearing the costume of nobility. So, for 11 days, I did what I do. I reviewed her consents. I flagged a drug interaction her outside cardiologist had missed, a real one that could have caused a serious bleeding event in surgery. I got it corrected. I set up her pre-op, her anesthesia consult, and her post-op rehab placement. And on that Thursday morning, Deborah Vance and my husband came to my ward where I was in charge, mid-shift, badge on, 12 patients under my responsibility, to have a conversation about her discharge planning. That's what it was supposed to be, discharge planning. What it turned into was this. "I've decided," Deborah announced in the corridor outside room 412, loud enough for the nurses' station and my staff and the whiteboard with my name on it as charge, with an expression I'll remember until I die. Amused, pitying. This is exactly where you should be having this conversation, Rowan. This is your level. Beckett Oyalaran, my charge nurse, had stopped filling a chart and was standing very still 6 feet away. "Deborah, you need to leave my floor." And that's when she said it, the sentence, the loud one, the one that 11 staff and 4 patients and a ceiling-mounted camera all caught. "Don't you dare take that tone. You're a nurse, Rowan. You empty bedpans. You are not family. You never have been family, and you will never." "Mom?" Trent, finally, not stopping her, steering her. "Not here." And Deborah Vance, 72 out from open-heart surgery in a hospital I'd gotten her into, and in a ward I was in charge of, turned back to me, lifted the paper cup of coffee she'd carried in from the lobby, and threw it in my face. Here's what happens in a hospital ward when someone assaults a nurse, and I want to describe it precisely, because most people imagine chaos, and what actually happens is procedure. Beckett Oyalaran was moving before the cup hit the floor. He got me to the eye wash station in 11 seconds. I know because he logged it. My charge nurse logged the elapsed time. God bless him. 2 nurses took over my patients without being asked. Somebody hit the security call. And Deborah Vance stood in the middle of my ward, coffee dripping down my badge and my collar and my scrubs, and said into the silence, "Oh, for heaven's sake, it was barely warm." It was not barely warm. Lobby coffee runs about 175 degrees. The burns on my right forearm and collarbone were 2nd degree, photographed, measured, and charted by staff who do exactly that 11 times a shift. I did not scream at her. I did not cry. I want to be honest, it wasn't strength. It was the thing that happens to me under fire, the same thing that happened in a plywood trauma bay overseas. Everything slows down and I get very calm and very clear, and I start doing the next correct thing. The next correct thing was, "Beckett, call security and call risk management, and don't let her leave the floor." The next correct thing after that was to look at my husband. "Ro, do you want to say anything at all before this becomes a legal matter?" "Ro, don't be dramatic. She's upset. You know how she gets." Security arrived. 2 officers, professional, unhurried. Risk management arrived 4 minutes later in the form of a woman named Anne-Marie with a tablet and absolutely no sense of humor. And Deborah, still not understanding, this is the part that still astonishes me, turned to the security officer and said, "Thank goodness, this woman needs to be removed. She's been harassing my family for weeks." The officer looked at her, then at me, soaked, blistering, badge in hand, then at the ceiling camera. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me." They took her to a conference room on the 2nd floor. They took Trent, too, and Anne-Marie from Risk Management took me to the Occupational Health Office, where a doctor I'd worked beside for 6 years dressed my burns and did not make one single joke, which is how I knew how bad my face looked. Then Anne-Marie sat across from me with her tablet and said the words that ended the Vance family as I knew it. "Major Vance, I need you to inform you of your options, and I need you to understand something first." She looked at me steadily. "What happened out there is not a family dispute. A visitor assaulted a staff member on duty, causing documented injury in front of 11 witnesses and on camera. Under state law, assault on a healthcare worker in the course of their duties is a felony. That's not a policy we choose to apply. That's the law, and this hospital is a mandatory reporter." I sat there with gauze on my collarbone. "So the police are already involved," I said. "They're on their way. The report is being filed regardless of what you want, because the institution is a victim too. This happened in our building, to our staff." She paused. "What you control is whether you cooperate as the complaining witness and whether you pursue civil action. And, Major, I've done this job 11 years. When the assailant's own son stood there and said, 'Don't be dramatic,' 4 witnesses heard it. That's in the statements." I closed my eyes.
"There's one more thing," Anne-Marie said, "and I debated whether to say it today, but you should hear it from me." "Say it." "Dr. Rashid is in the conference room with them right now." She turned her tablet face down, and she opened the meeting by introducing herself as the Chief of Staff, and then she introduced you by your new title. Everything went very still. The announcement was Monday. Then a woman assaulted our incoming medical director on her own ward, and Dr. Rashid decided Monday was going to be a little early. Something moved at the corner of Anne-Marie's mouth. She apologizes for the timing. She said, and I'm quoting, "Under the circumstances, I found it clinically indicated." I sat in occupational health with second-degree burns on my collarbone and started to laugh, one broken, painful, undignified laugh, and then I put my hand over my mouth because the next thing that wanted to come out wasn't laughter at all. 9 years. You're a nurse, Rowan. You empty bedpans. And 2 floors below me at that exact moment, my mother-in-law was learning that the woman she'd spent 9 years calling the help had been running the building since 6:04 that morning. I would have given a great deal to see her face. As it turned out, I didn't have to imagine it, because 40 minutes later, Deborah Vance did something none of us expected, and it turned a criminal case into something much stranger and much worse for her. She asked to speak to me, alone.
So here's what I know now, and then I'll let you go. The coffee didn't change my family. That's the thing I got wrong for a long time. I kept describing that Thursday as the day everything changed, and it wasn't. Nothing changed that morning. Everything was simply revealed in front of 11 witnesses and a camera in high definition with a timestamp. Deborah had been throwing that coffee for 9 years. She'd just been doing it in living rooms where nobody documented anything. And Trent had been standing 3 feet away saying, "Don't be dramatic," for 9 years, too. The only difference on that Thursday was that other people finally heard him say it. If you're in a family like that, I already know what I'm describing. It isn't the big incidents, it's the drip. The introduction that leaves off your title. The joke at a 13-year-old's expense that everyone laughs at because it's easier than the silence. That's just how she is. Nobody in those families is ever cruel, exactly. They're just always slightly less than kind, in a direction that always points at the same person. And here's the trap, the one I lived in for nearly a decade. They will train you to believe that your tolerance is a virtue, that absorbing it is maturity, that rising above is strength. It isn't, not always. Sometimes absorbing impact is just teaching people that hitting you is free. I know exactly when the drip becomes a flood, and I'll tell you because it might save you 9 years. It's the moment they need something from you. Because the moment my mother-in-law needed a surgical schedule moved, she remembered my name, my number, and my competence overnight. All that contempt evaporated the second it became inconvenient. That's how you know it was never a belief about you. It was a position they took because it paid. 3 things, and then I'm done. If you're the one being told you're not really family, start with this. You cannot earn your way in. I tried for 9 years. There is no performance of usefulness that converts a person who has decided you're beneath them. They don't want you to succeed at the audition. They want the audition to continue forever because the audition is the point. Stop auditioning. Something enormous comes back to you the day you do. If you're the person at the table, the brother-in-law, the cousin, the one who finds their plate very interesting, hear me. You are not neutral. There is no neutral. The silence at that Easter table did more damage to a 13-year-old than the sentence did, because the sentence was one woman being cruel, and the silence was 14 people agreeing. It costs you 1 sentence. That's enough. 4 syllables. Say it. And if you're doing work somebody in your life treats as small, nursing, teaching, driving, cleaning, caring, I want you to hear this from a woman with gauze on her collarbone and a director's badge on her chest.
The people who sneer at what you do have never once needed it at 4 in the morning. But they will. Everyone does, eventually. And when they do, it won't be their contempt that keeps their heart beating. It'll be you. That's the whole thing. That's all I've got. If this sat somewhere real in you, if you've been the one absorbing impact for years and calling it strength, stay close. There are a lot of us here, and we're all putting our coffee cups down. And tell me in the comments, because I read every single one, what's the thing your family treats as small, and how many years did it take you to stop apologizing for it?